The Vietnam War was a very long and bloody war that lasted for 19 years and 180 days, which started on the 1st of November 1955 and ended on the 30th of April 1975. It was a civil war, a war between North Vietnam, which was communist, and South Vietnam, which was anti-communist. The war was fought in North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Before the war, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia was once part of a French colony called the Indochina. It was occupied by the Japanese during World War II in 1940. A Vietnamese group called Viet Minh decided to resist the occupiers and they went to war. Japan lost and left Vietnam in 1945. After the Japanese defeat, the French wanted to reclaim her colony, but the Viet Minh only allowed them to enter Vietnam if the French agreed that Vietnam will be an independent country as part of the French colony. Both sides had conflict, and so began the First Indochina War. The Viet Minh won the war when the French were defeated in Dien Bien Phu in 1954. Vietnam then officially split into two after the Geneva Conference that was held from April to July 1954. Ho Chi Minh, communist, and was the leader of the Viet Minh, led North Vietnam, while different people who gained the support of the United States because they were anti-communist led South Vietnam. Americans wanted to resist communism to further spread around the world, which was a long-term consequence if the South Vietnam became communist like the North. They feared that a domino theory would start. More countries in Asia would turn communist too. The Americans used this domino theory to clarify the reason why they joined wars that were related to the spread of communism. If communism spread to other places, there would be no stopping of it, and communist countries will destroy the United States and other democratic nations in Europe. In March 12, 1947, in an address to the Congress, President Harry S. Truman declared it to be a foreign policy of the United States to help any country who was threatened by communism. That was why the United States sent money, weapons, soldiers to help South Vietnam in the war. The government owns all wealth of the country and the money is given to citizens equally or according to their needs. Advantages of communism. It aims to end inequality, racism, poverty, and discrimination. There will be no upper class or lower class because everyone will be the same. The disadvantages of communism. Wealthy people lose their properties and money, and they may be hard-earned salary, and they are distributed to the rest of the population instead. Everyone gets paid the same. A more experienced and harder worker will get paid the same as a less experienced worker who doesn't do his job well. This can also cause harder workers to not work as much because they will be paid the same anyways. Nothing will be produced and the economy will go down. During the Vietnam War, some of the North Vietnam's weapons were supported by the Soviet Union, while South Vietnam was supported by the United States. There was a long-term state of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union at the time, and this was called the Cold War. There was never any direct military action between the two because both sides had nuclear weapons and it would cause drastic consequences and massive destruction. That is why the Vietnam War was part of the Cold War history, as both Soviet Union and the United States was involved and they were fighting against each other indirectly. Fear and stress filled the hearts of every person who lost their family or friends, who were either killed or fled the country during the war, or survived but injured, or had mental illness. 2 out of 3 Americans thought that joining the Vietnam War was a mistake. They didn't support it, and this affected the image of the United States internationally and within its own country. There was a lot of damage to their environment in Vietnam. They had to repair buildings, roads, bridges, railroads, factories that had been bombed or damaged during the war. It took decades to recover from the loss of life and damage of war. Almost 30 years later, it is still trying to rebuild. The Americans had never lost a war until Vietnam. It was the longest and most costly war the United States has ever fought. The cost of the war led to inflation and budget shortfalls, which lasted until the 1990s in the United States. The Cambodian Civil War was part of the Vietnam War. It was between the Communist Party called Khmer Rouge, who were allies with North Vietnam, and government of Cambodia, who were allies with the United States. It started in 1970 and ended on the 17th of April, 1975. The similarities between the two wars are that both wars were civil wars with the theme of communism. The non-communists also received help from the United States. The United States helped Cambodia government troops because of the domino theory. They sent military aid, supplies, and equipment was funneled to the Cambodia government troops through the military equipment delivery team. The communist side won both wars, Vietnam becoming communist, then Cambodia too. The new rulers of Cambodia were the Khmer Rouge, so the Americans' domino theory nightmare became true. The differences between both wars was that the Vietnam War was a much longer war. It was 20 years long, but the Cambodian War was only 5 years long. Although the Cambodian War was shorter, more people died because of the genocide.